Here in the wheat fields on the outskirts of Sderot, we find some potsherds that date back to the time of the Philistines, the old stomping ground of Samson. And this is what Scripture has to say, the word of the Lord that came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Philistines before Pharaoh attacked Gaza.
It took 8 years of Qassam rocket fire and 1,000 Israeli casualties to spark a concerted action against Hamas, Islamic fundamentalist terrorists in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli armed response was coined Operation Cast Lead. Roots and Reflections was there.
The world media has been camped out on this hill on the outskirts of Sderot, filming the war in Gaza. In one direction is Sderot, where people are running into shelters to take cover from bomb attacks. In this direction, I have a son serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. It seems so surreal as we look into the Gaza Strip, we witness the plumes of smoke and the weapons of war and the reality that it brings, knowing that even as a father who has a son fighting in the Gaza Strip, one has to continually be in prayer for the survival of those inside fighting for freedom. And of course, we all pray that peace will come to this region for the residents of the Gaza Strip, all the way to the residents of Sderot. May there be peace.
While doing the stand-up opposite Gaza City, less than a kilometer from the border with the Gaza Strip, Hamas terrorists fire a Qassam rocket. The alarm is sounded in the town, and 15 seconds later comes the explosion. Fortunately, the rocket explodes in the open field, not far from our camera position. A second rocket is fired from the crowded alleys of the Jabalia refugee camp in our direction.
There's an incoming rocket. Rolling up.
Israeli forces hit back at one of the sources of the rocket fire. Crowds around the world protested Israel's defensive action, calling it genocide and a crime against humanity. Actually, Israel took every precaution to limit innocent civilian casualties. Hamas propaganda inflated these civilian figures while underreporting the number of its gunmen lost in action. The terrorists regularly fired rockets from crowded neighborhoods, sheltering behind women and children.
We all have seen the event in Jabalia refugee camp when a girl, 13 years old, that her family lived close to a mosque that was transferred to be a warehouse of missiles and rockets and explosives. And when we attacked the mosque and their house destroyed and her family got injured and killed, and she was asked by a Palestinian interviewer, what do you have to say to the whole world? And that girl answered a very clear answer. And she said, it's all due to responsibility of Hamas that destroyed our refugee camp, destroyed my family.
When it comes to the ground operation, we should be careful. We should be sophisticated and smart what to do and how. We know very well the Hamas fighters, our terrorists, are waiting on the ground. So we'll have to consider what and how to do in order to avoid casualties on our side. And also I would emphasize that we would like to avoid casualties of citizens on the Palestinian side, something that we have been very careful since the very beginning of the operation.
This is Sderot, a beautiful city, but one that has suffered under the barrage of rocket attacks more than any city in Israel.
The 20,000 residents of Sderot have faced death and destruction for years. During this time, Israeli governments have sought to avoid a military confrontation, but Hamas gunmen just kept pouring rocket fire into the Jewish communities, killing and injuring hundreds.
Wherever one walks in Sderot, it's important to keep your eyes open for the next available shelter. Because of incoming rockets and mortars, you have 15 seconds to get to the nearest shelter, many of which have been donated by Christians from around the world. Sderot is just about 1 mile away from the border with Gaza. It has suffered rocket attacks since the year 2001 by the hundreds, but yet life has to go on. Eating, shopping, going to school, going to work. This is all part of life until the next rocket siren is sounded.
The girl is traumatized. She's 9 years old. My daughter was 3 when the Qassam attack started. She actually saw one of her kindergarten friends who'd been killed. She saw her shattered body on the floor. I don't know what to do for her. Her school says it's not because of the Qassams, but she's traumatized. She doesn't want to go to school anymore.
Stay up to date with what's happening in Israel and the Jewish and Arab people with up-to-the-minute information and news from a biblical perspective. Sign up today to the Jerusalem News Network, a wealth of free information, comment and up-to-date news direct from believers living in the land. This includes our regular Jerusalem on the Line email update, now available in multiple languages. To sign up, go to rootsforyou.tv. This is the best way to keep informed of what's going on in Israel.
Sderot's police station is the collection point for the thousands of Qassam and Grad rockets fired at the Sderot area from the Gaza Strip.
Gradually they've become larger, both the numbers of rockets that have fallen, as well as the distances that they've been fired at. This is a Qassam rocket, a 60mm Qassam rocket, one of the smaller of the Qassam rockets. The range of this rocket is just over up to 4 kilometers. So we're talking about all the different small towns in the area as well as Sderot. So even the smallest of rockets, a 60mm rocket, can land and has caused and has killed innocent civilians. This is one of the larger rockets. It in fact has a double motor. So we can see that gradually the different terrorist organizations are trying to improve both the distance as well as the warhead. If we look at the rocket itself, which has already, if you take into consideration the height of it, that most of it has already been blown out. What is left is approximately maybe 50%. So take into consideration the type of rocket this is, the type of damage it can cause within the radius of approximately 50 meters, where people are standing, people will be seriously injured. Until 2005, until the disengagement, approximately 600 rockets were fired into Israel, both into the city of Sderot, where we are now, as well as to the other cities around the north of Gaza. And I can tell you and can confirm that there's been hundreds of casualties. If Israel thought that in 2005 terrorism would stop and leaving the Gaza Strip there would be a lower level of terrorism, well, unfortunately we've experienced exactly the opposite, and what has taken place.
Sderot residents have experienced a reign of terror. In walking the streets for a few hours, one feels the tension. But over time, that tension builds up like steam in a pressure cooker, causing psychological disturbances. Men, women, and children simply break down. I spoke to Tamar, whose family home was destroyed by a Qassam rocket a year ago.
Yeah, before a year ago, my home is Qassam fall in my house, a rocket. And we don't have shelter to go there, so we go to the hall, we stand there, and all my house is ruined.
During the 8-month home rebuilding, Tamar's family was visited by Defense Minister Ehud Barak and U.S. presidential candidate at the time, Senator Barack Obama.
This is a picture of doing the shiputzim, the remodeling here.
Yeah, in my house. This is my father, and Ehud Barak, and Obama.
So you may be able to get a job in Washington.
Maybe.
Tell me, other homes have been hit in this area?
Yeah, a lot of homes. We have here home in this place and 2 homes over there, and we have upstairs and after my house. A lot of homes is place the most eaten in the Qassam, in Sderot.
The Israeli Foreign Ministry set up a media center in the town of Sderot to serve journalists during Operation Cast Lead. At the center, I spoke to Ronnie Shai, a career diplomat drafted to journalistically explain Israel's action in Gaza.
Ever since you hear the alarm, you have 15 seconds to hide yourself somewhere. And try to imagine your life like this. Like if you walk on the street to do your normal things of a normal human being, you have to be, all the time, you have to be within a 15 seconds range from a safe place. Some 3 years ago, the government decided to withdraw from the Gaza Strip, took something like almost 10,000 people out of their houses. We completely withdrew from the Gaza Strip and we told them, listen, you have this area, you have the possibility to control your life now. We are not going to bother you anymore. What we got in return was a few months later, in the general election in the Palestinian Authority, Hamas got something like 70% of the popular vote. 70%, that was the response of the Palestinians to the Israel unilateral withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. And it was the first time Hamas came into power, and I would like to remind you that Hamas is a terror organization, okay? That was the first response that we have got. The second one was escalating the situation in terms of launching missiles and rockets.
Terrorism can strike in Israel at any time, whether in the form of a suicide bombing or the regular and sustained rocket attacks still continuing, targeted from Gaza. Through the ministry of the Joseph Storehouse, we can respond quickly and bring help and relief to the victims of these terror attacks. We provide vital medical and emergency supplies to some of the frontline hospitals responding to these attacks. We are also able to supply humanitarian aid to those deeply affected. Your giving to this ministry enables us to respond quickly and effectively. Would you call the number on the screen or go online to roots4u.tv and give today? Or why not become a monthly partner with us? And together we can touch the lives of the victims of terror and rocket attacks across Israel and bring relief to those who need it most. Thank you.
Sderot is no major metropolis, but it is a significant center servicing the agricultural communities of the western Negev. Sderot's industrial area provides thousands of jobs.
Sderot is sort of the gate for the south. If you come from the coast area, this is the gate for the south.
One thing about Sderot, we haven't found a decent coffee place yet in this town. Maybe one day there will be, and they'll name all the drinks on the house after the various missiles and rockets that have come flying in. Stay tuned.
Even a clown turned out to help smiling Sderot faces.
Mom, what are you doing here? Don't you know there's a war going on? Go home, it's dangerous here, Mommy. I need someone to watch over my mom.
8 years of rocket fire on Sderot has brought death, injury, destruction, and trauma. Aliza is one of the many victims.
Aliza, where did the rocket hit?
Here, it brought down the whole ceiling. All the cabinets collapsed on the marble floor. Everything was shattered and fell on the refrigerator and dishwasher. Everything. I was standing over here. I heard the red alert, but didn't have enough time to take cover. We don't have a safe room or bomb shelter. I got this far when the rocket hit, and the blast hurled me to the floor and sprayed shrapnel into my legs. I was unconscious. Everything was dark, dusty, with water gushing all over from the broken plumbing. They were crying, "Aliza, Aliza!" When I came to, I had terrible pain in my legs. We were trapped inside the rubble of the house. My husband broke a window. Eventually, they dragged me out over the rubble. Part of the rocket broke off and penetrated the neighbor's gas tank. It was empty. If it had penetrated our gas tank, which was full, the whole place would have gone up in flames. It was a miracle. The attack occurred during Hanukkah. Despite all the damage, this Chanukiah, which my husband made, he's a scribe by profession, was left hanging on its nail in the kitchen. The ceiling collapsed around it, with water gushing all over it, but it remained intact. It's a Psalm of David inscribed in the form of the Chanukiah. There were miracles and wonders, thank God. The neighbors said that all of Sderot shook from the blast. The shrapnel went all over the neighborhood. The bomb squad that came said that the impact was so powerful that if it had exploded inside the house instead of on the roof, nobody would have survived.
Since the Israeli disengagement from Gaza in 2005, Hamas rocket makers and smugglers, with Iranian help, have increased the range of their deadly missiles. During Operation Cast Lead, Hamas Grad rockets struck as far as Ashdod and Beersheba. One deadly projectile fell near this bus stop. At the site of the attack, we met Benjamin Netanyahu, then parliamentary opposition leader.
Mrs. Shitrit, Irit Shitrit, 39-year-old mother of 4, went to an exercise room, then went to the bus stop. The rocket fell here. The pellets from the rocket went right through the screen that you see there and cut her down. And so we lost this woman to this criminal firing of rockets into civilian populations. I think it gives you an indication of what people are going through. What we have is day in, day out, Israeli civilians are subjected to terror. Some of them are killed, some of them are maimed, and hundreds of thousands are terrorized daily. And this is something that is important to explain to people who ask, why is Israel acting in Gaza? Because this is what any country would do, any government would do, if you had hundreds of thousands and pretty soon 1 million people terrorized by daily rocket fire.
Bibi responded to a British journalist's contention that Israel's military response was disproportional, complaining that for every Israeli death, nearly 100 Gazans lost their lives.
At least 60 civilians have died in Gaza. Is that proportionate?
Well, should we fire 6,000 rockets into Gaza? Is that the proportional response? We try to go after the terrorists. The terrorists are deliberately hiding behind civilians as they fire into civilians. And of course, we can't give them immunity. We try to minimize civilian casualties. The overwhelming number of people who've been killed in Gaza have been Hamas activists who are firing rockets, who are manning the arms depots of additional rockets. I don't suggest that the number of casualties be the determinant of what is proportionate and who's in the right, because on that basis, Britain was in the wrong and Germany was in the right. The number of German casualties in World War II far, far, far exceeded the number of British casualties. But Britain was in the right in responding to the air attacks on London and Birmingham and other cities in Britain, and Israel's in the right in responding to the attacks at Ashkelon.
Almog found some ball-bearing shrapnel pieces packed into Hamas Qassams. These are designed to maximize civilian casualties.
School was cancelled because of the rocket attacks. I found these pieces of shrapnel from the Qassam.
Many of the Qassam rocket casualties over the years were transferred to the Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon. It serves a population of 500,000 people from Ashkelon to Sderot. Because of constant rocket attacks during Operation Cast Lead, the hospital declared a state of emergency, evacuating 80% of its regular patients. Instead, Barzilai was turned into the frontline trauma center for injured civilians and IDF soldiers wounded in action.
We now have to deal with rocket attacks on the hospital itself. We have to make sure that we are functioning in sheltered places so we can operate, we can treat the injured people in sheltered places since the rockets are hitting the hospital and the area around the hospital.
Vision for Israel and the Joseph Storehouse are on the front line of helping medical emergency clinics and hospitals such as this one.
While doing a Joseph Storehouse promotional stand-up in front of the Barzilai emergency room, Ashkelon came under a rocket attack.
And those... Right now, we have to run in, take cover due to a rocket attack coming against Ashkelon.
With sirens blaring, we seek refuge from the Grad rocket attack in the emergency room. Here it's safe, protected by the massive reinforced concrete walls of the hospital basement.
Hear the sirens and know that you have only 15 seconds to run for your life, so you don't know who to grab first, your children, your elderly, or your pets. You just have to run for life, and you look for a place to hide. And this can be up to 60, 70 times a day. And 21% out of these thousands and thousands of patients that we receive are turning to be chronically ill, which means no school, no work. Their life is shattered completely.
It used to be called shell shock. Today, it's more accurately described as post-traumatic stress. Many of Sderot's residents, including children, suffer from this condition. Those facing post-traumatic stress need a helping hand. And Vision for Israel reaches out to them with material assistance.
The first one fell over there next to the synagogue. The second fell there on the other side of the apartment building. I've had Qassams fall on me 7 times. I thought God was going to take me. I'm nearly paralyzed. Yes, it happened after the ceasefire went into effect. I was hospitalized for over a week.
So, one fell here,
And one behind the apartment block. And one there where the white car is. Wow, I was sitting there. Suddenly, Tseva Adom, the red alert. I didn't run. And then boom! The windows around were broken. And from the shock, I fell down the stairs. That's how I was injured.
Segal.
This is for you, this too, from the Joseph Storehouse.
She's a girl. Tomorrow she'll be 1 year old.
I didn't know there was a baby here too, otherwise I would have brought stuff for her.
לא ידעתי שיש תינוקת, אז אני אביא עוד גם לה. לירון, שלום.
Liron, shalom, Liron. What's Tseva Adom?
לירון, מה זה צבע אדום?
It's an alarm, a siren. Why red? I don't know why. It used to be called Shachar Adom. But then people complained, as there were guys called Shachar. And one thought they were calling his name when the alarm went off. In Netivot, they have music for the alarm, which is certainly different from what we have here.
Flowers are blooming everywhere in Sderot. Look at this flower. It's the color Tseva Adom, red. That is Adom in Hebrew. That's our word of the week. So tell me, what does Tseva Adom mean to you? There you have it. It's a dog-eat-dog world for them in Sderot.
More and more Israelis have fallen under the range of Hamas rockets. During Operation Cast Lead, communities that had never experienced attacks awoke to the nasty surprise of sirens and explosions. Officials faced the dilemma of whether or not to close schools. Here in Kiryat Malachi, a siren went off while we were at the school. We have 30 seconds to get to the basement shelter ahead of a potential missile blast on the building. Kindergartens and schools were indeed hit during the war, but thankfully all were empty of children. Here in the bomb shelter, teachers and a school psychologist comfort several visibly distressed teens. Some schools in the expanded line of Hamas rocket fire don't have accessible bomb shelters. This classroom is too far from the main bomb shelter for these kids to make it to safety in 30 seconds. So, when the alarm sounds, the students evacuate the room, lining up behind a thicker concrete hallway wall, which hopefully offers sufficient protection. Besides providing direct help to victims in the war zone, Vision for Israel and the Joseph Storehouse provide medical supplies to hospitals and humanitarian aid to organizations like Hands of Mercy. Shipment pickups are collected at the Joseph Storehouse in the Judean Hills near Jerusalem.
I hope you come again.
Later, I visit the Hands of Mercy Center in Sderot, joining Ishai Reinhardt and his crew unload the Joseph Storehouse aid earmarked for the needy residents of the traumatized city.
Tuvia is my friend. He has 12 children. He lives in the center of town.
We have him adopted because some of his family were terrorist victims, Qassam victims, and so הוא חבר שלי. So we have an adoption sponsorship program that adopts families like his that are going through the struggle after the Qassam rocket attacks for a year, maybe longer.
What can organizations like ours, Vision for Israel and the Joseph Storehouse, do? How can we network and be of help?
I'm very thankful what you're already doing with supplying so many blankets and clothing. These families are destitute for finances. They have no work because so many industries have left town, and so they can network with you, and then you help us with the clothing, with food. And so we are preparing now that you see bomb shelters being built all over the city. I can take you and you can see 50 being built at the moment. And they'll build one here for us so that when the red alert happens, we can run and take shelter. And the important thing is that God being our refuge and our strength, a very present help in time of trouble, that's why we're naming this place the Refuge.
The problem is that someone who experiences a Qassam rocket attack suffers an ongoing trauma. Whenever you hear the Tzeva Adom after that, it's like a nightmare, like a horror movie played back during those 15 seconds. When I hear the phone ring or the doorbell, it makes me jump. Red alert! My 14-year-old daughter is traumatized. After every alert, she goes into shock, trembles, and she's in constant depression and doesn't sleep at night. She's traumatized.
Right now we've got 10 patients from Gaza. 2 of them are children. One of the children, the mother came pregnant, and last night she had a baby in a shelter inside Barzilai, a newborn girl. And obviously she's very happy to be in a sheltered place.
Perhaps you may say I'm a little naive, perhaps, but I do believe that there are so many miracles happening around this battle. As even, for example, when one time after the other, the missiles are dropping on houses, on apartment buildings, and no casualties. It happens once, it happens again. It seems as if God is keeping an eye on us.